All right, we are giving you some deep sleepers
That's
in
right.
your 2023 Dynasty rookie drafts. We released a video last week that was called Sleepers, and you guys like, we want some deeper ones like round 3 and 4. So everyone that we're talking about today has an ADP of round 3 or 4 in
That's right.
Superflex rookie drafts. Do us a massive favor. Drop a like to show some support. Subscribe if you like Dynasty content, and I want you to comment down below who is your favorite deep sleeper
Deep.
before we start,
Come
and
on,
maybe
baby.
you have the same one as one of us.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, do you want access to our rankings, Badake and myself?
Yeah.
Dynasty 1 quarterback,
Oh.
Superflex,
Oh.
rookie rankings.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to have your rankings on Flock Fantasy? Then go ahead and sign up with our code LAND at flockfantasy.com/land. There's a link in the description. If you sign up to the Mother Flocker tier, then you'll have a Dynasty team grade on a live stream from Badake and myself. You'll have access to the Fantasy Hotline, which is a personalized DM for advice, and much, much more. Okay, we've got 4 sleepers. I'll go ahead and start with my first one.
Yeah.
It's a guy that I've loved all offseason. And man, the draft capital is awful, but the situation, I think, is very enticing. That is Zach Evans. Currently, I looked at our last 2 real drafts, Badake, that we've done in Superflex leagues and our last mock draft, so 3. And he's going anywhere from the 302 to the 306, somewhere around there, okay?
Yeah.
So early, mid, sometimes even late 3rd round. And that's kind of where I would draft him. I wouldn't draft him in the 2nd round, but kind of in that 302 to 306 to 307 range is where I think he should be drafted. But I think there's a lot of upside here, or potential upside. And, you know, what we should say is, before we talk about these sleepers, it is more than likely that most of these guys are irrelevant. But we're trying to find the needle in the haystack.
Yeah.
None of these players that we're talking about are going to be top 10 at their position year 1, right? We're trying to find those needle in the haystack players that you can bet on if situations go their way. But that's what I see with Zach Evans. Firstly, I think the depth chart in LA is very beatable. It's a shaky depth chart. We'll talk about Cam Akers in a second, but outside of Cam Akers, we've got Kyron Williams, who started 0 games in 2022 in a backfield that had a ton of question marks. And the games that he did play, he averaged under 14 rushing yards a game. He averaged under 14 rushing yards a game. That's probably not the running back that's going to come in and, you know, dominate this backfield if Akers has an injury or if he stumbles with the organization. Speaking of Cam Akers, let's talk about him. I will acknowledge he played really, really well to end the 2022 season.
Come on, baby.
That is the only thing Akers truthers have to hold on to right now.
That's all we need, baby. That's all we need.
There's a lot of concern, but he played well to end the year. And I feel like I'm having flashbacks because I'm trying to tell people, you know, Cam Akers, you know, there's a lot of concerns. Last year, I was telling no one to draft him, and for similar reasons. But Cam Akers has started 14 of the last 50 games he's been on the team. 14 of the last 50 games the Rams have played. Meaning since he was drafted in 2020, he has only been the starting running back for 28% of the games he has been an LA Ram. He also has arguably the worst injury we have seen for the running back position historically. I mean, we've not seen much success from running backs after this injury. It's a mixed bag, at least, right? You can talk about D'Onta Foreman.
Right.
He's played well as of recent, but he's now 3 to 4 years removed from that injury. He did not play well. In fact, he was cut by his team after the injury. How about James Robinson, right? Started the year really well last year, and I'm trying to pound the table for Travis Etienne, and people are telling me, no, James Robinson's the guy. James Robinson's the guy. We don't even know if James Robinson is going to make the Patriots. He might be cut. Who knows? It's very difficult to trust this injury because so much of a running back's explosiveness comes from their ankle, the ability to quickly cut, to get through a hole. And without the Achilles being in its original condition, that's tough to bet on. Akers is also in the last year of a contract. So if he comes out the gate kind of stumbling, what incentive do the Rams have to give him this backfield without any competition? James Robinson was traded, right? And now he was cut by the Jets. Now he's a Patriot, okay? So he was traded. D'Onta Foreman was cut by the Texans after his injury. I don't know of a running back who has suffered this injury and has gotten big long-term money from a team. Let me know if I'm missing someone in the comments below. But I can't think of a single running back who has been given long-term commitment from a team after an injury like this. And if you look at Cam Akers' season in 2022 as a whole, the people who like Akers are only going to focus on the back half. Well, what about the beginning? Because we should look at the season as a whole. Well, if you look at his season as a whole, he was 68th in yards per attempt at 4.2, which is not a bad number, but still 68th. He was 69th in yards after contact per attempt at 2.78. He was very good at forcing missed tackles. He was 20th in the NFL, or at the position. His explosive run rate, which are runs of 10 or more yards, was 30th. He had 17 of those. His breakaway percentage was 66th. By the way, the same breakaway percentage as Marlon Mack, the same explosive run rate as Ezekiel Elliott. His yards per route run was 99th, 0.71 yards per route run. His elusive rating was 55th. So I'm not showing you these analytics to suggest that Zach Evans is automatically going to be given the RB1 role and he's just going to be better in those areas. But the reason I brought these numbers to you is to suggest that Cam Akers does not have this backfield on lockdown by any means. Because if you look at Cam Akers and his efficiency last year, in my opinion, he's on a short leash. If we don't see the Cam Akers that we saw in the last couple games of the season last year, he will be on a very, very short leash. And if you look at the history of Sean McVay and his running backs after Todd Gurley, then it's a mixed bag as far as like who gets the opportunities. Now, the reason I say after Todd Gurley is because you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see a running back on this roster that is like prime Todd Gurley, who's going to demand those kind of opportunities. But since 2020, if you look at the running back splits in this backfield, okay, Akers had 46% of the rushing attempts in 2022. This is rushing attempts, by the way. Henderson had 17. Well, Henderson only played 10 games. In 2021, Michelle had 50%, Henderson had 35%. And then in 2020, there's not a running back on this team that had over 31% of the rushing opportunities. So at minimum, I think Zach Evans will get an opportunity. The only time we've seen Sean implore a running back one workhorse role was with Todd Gurley. So again, I feel very strongly that Evans is going to get an opportunity to show what he has. The rest is up to him. I'm trying to find the needle in the haystack. Isaiah Pacheco was this superstar, 7th round pick last year. I think Evans could be in that category this year as a guy you take in the 3rd, 4th round, and maybe he gets an opportunity. If Akers gets injured, if Akers is inefficient. I mean, remember, there were games where Akers was like 2 yards per attempt. Like, there were multiple games where he was just, really rough. And I know the offensive line wasn't where it was, but there's a lot of signs pointing towards, at minimum, Evans getting an opportunity to show what he has.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely see Evans getting some sort of opportunity, without a doubt. So let's see what happens. Shout out to the Cam Akers. Truth is out there. We believe. My first deep player that I'm bringing here for you, and I think a lot of the community is kind of leaning on this as well, but I love it, and that's Sean Tucker, without a doubt. He is a guy that has just been really exciting before the NFL draft, before the NFL combine, and then kind of died down. But our latest ADP in our Alpha draft, he went undrafted, and I actually picked him up. Bravo League, he was drafted at the 409. So obviously he's going within the 4th round or potentially undrafted in some of your leagues. But there is, I would say, a potential to a clear pathway, maybe a little bit of a shaky pathway, but there is opportunity there, right? No doubt in this Tampa Bay backfield, there is Rachaad White. Okay, Rachaad White, he's going to be getting all the workload, 1st, 2nd, and potentially 3rd down workload. And there's really no one else after that if you really think about it. And that you have Chase Edmonds. Came in, got signed in the offseason, gets a 1-year deal. And he was with the Miami Dolphins last year. And he was coming into this NFL, this past NFL season, Chase Edmonds was kind of getting, the steam of train coming into in the Dynasty startups, saying, hey, he can be the guy. He can be the starting guy because Raheem Mostert is always going to get injured. Then that kind of falls off. Week 1 comes around, he has a decent game, and then week 2, who's Chase Edmonds? That's exactly what happened, right? And then he goes up. Raheem Mostert was the guy. They pick up Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson was the guy. So if Chase Edmonds couldn't beat out a 31-year-old Raheem Mostert and a Jeff Wilson who was learning the playbook essentially the whole time while he was on the fields, then I'm not necessarily sure that is a true concern for, I would potentially say, Sean Tucker coming into this backfield. And also, the past 2 years, he did miss a couple games. There's always been, he always going on IR with some sort of hamstring or foot injury, and Edmonds always finds himself on the bench with some sort of injury, which is unfortunate for him, right? So if Chase Edmonds can't beat out a 31 Raheem the Dream or a one-year deal, Jeff Wilson, then I think there could be a potential pathway there for Sean Tucker. Also, I know for some of these lovers there, Keyshawn Vaughn is there, third-round draft pick, who surprisingly has the highest draft capital on this team, by the way. A higher draft capital than Rachaad White, Sean Tucker, and everyone else on this team. But if he hasn't lived up to expectation, he wasn't a guy that has seen the field too often. And once again, you kind of already projecting Chase Edmonds to be ahead of Keyshawn Vaughn, so I'm not necessarily worried. But Sean Tucker is the guy that I want to talk about. Obviously, he's the guy we all loved, coming out of college. He was the guy that was getting all the work, over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns on the ground. He led the ACC rushing yards in 2021. And in my opinion, when I was coming in, I thought he was a do-it-all back. Great speed, elusiveness, pass-catching ability, a guy that can, once again, do it all back. There was no doubt that Sean Tucker would have been drafted in this NFL draft. Probably not as high as we expected, the way the draft kind of panned out with all these running backs falling, right? So he probably would have gotten maybe the 4th round, 5th round capital, maybe even 6th round capital as we saw some of these running backs go in. But this heart defect, which kind of got brought up at the NFL Combine, which was unfortunate for him, doesn't mean that he still can't play football. And I think that's exactly what the Bucs are trying to do here. They're trying to help. They're trying to carve that pathway for him to say, okay, what is the best way and the safest way that we can get Sean Tucker on this field? And if those two guys, Sean Tucker and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coaching staff and health team, can come together and really bring a pathway, a good and safe pathway for Sean Tucker to get on this team to compete every single day in practice and in OTAs, whatever the case may be, I won't be surprised if Sean Tucker does make this team as an undrafted free agent. And once again, does Chase Edmonds make this team on a 1-year deal, right? I mean, this backfield can really be Rachaad White, Keyshawn Vaughn, and then Chase Edmonds. That could really be it. And Rachaad White played every single game, but he didn't have the full workload until the second half of the season, obviously with Tom Brady as a pass-catching guy. So, once again, if Rachaad White stays healthy or doesn't stay healthy, you're really hoping for an injury, which is unfortunate for Sean Tucker's scenario. But first step, he needs to make the team. If he makes a team, we'll have a new conversation of, okay, what is the true pathway and what is this backfield really looking like? But if you can take him, stash him, pick him up undrafted for your dynasty in your dynasty rookie drafts, then I think that's perfect for Sean and your team.
Yeah, he was a fun one to scout, and let's see what happens in Tampa Bay. All right, the second player I'm bringing to you guys was one of my favorite sleeper wide receivers in the draft. You've heard me talk about him a lot if you've been on the channel this offseason, but I think his ADP is very favorable in rookie drafts. That's Xavier Hutchinson.
Ooh.
He's going anywhere from late 3rd to mid 4th round. When I look at recent real drafts and mock drafts, again, late 3rd, mid 4th round, somewhere around that area. I would draft him anywhere from like the 308 to the 401 area.
Okay.
So I do love me some Xavier Hutchinson. But if you look at this team, to me, there's a lot of question marks in the wide receiver room. There's no solidified wide receiver 1. There's no Amari Cooper. There's no Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. There's no Justin Jefferson on this team, right? And just so I think it goes without saying, but I think I should say it. This is also a pro Tank Dell take as well. This is pro Tank Dell, pro Xavier Hutchinson. Nico Collins. I've always said he's just a guy. He's always felt like just a guy to me.
Unlucky.
Maybe CJ Stroud unlocks this part of him we've never seen. John Mechie should probably establish a role this year. He has the best draft capital of anyone on the team. Robert Woods has not aged gracefully due to injuries. I mean, he couldn't keep Nick Westbrook-Ikini off the field last year in Tennessee. We expect him to be some dominant player now. I'm not so certain. But if you look at Tank Dell and Xavier Hutchinson, they have more than enough chances to set themselves apart from this wide receiver room. And they have an extra bonus opportunity because they'll both be in rookie camps with CJ Stroud. Both Tank and Dell, again, have that extra little time to build chemistry with CJ Stroud during their rookie camps. And that is something that can't be understated because we see it happen every year. Whoever gets the opportunity to build chemistry with the quarterback first, they benefit a little bit from it. And if you're looking for, if the Texans are looking for someone who can produce, well, both Tank Dell, but I'm talking about Xavier Hutchinson, and Xavier have shown in college that they can put up big numbers. Xavier led the entire nation in college football in targets last year with 161. He was top 10 in receptions, top 10 in receiving yards. And if you look at the wide receivers that CJ has had success with, you look at Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, JSN, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka. What do all these wide receivers have in common? Well, firstly, they're all first-round picks, and they're all elite talents, and they are in different stratospheres compared to Xavier and Tank Dell. But they're also different style of players, but elite route runners. Xavier Hutchinson is a good route runner. And if CJ is looking for someone on this team to separate themselves, Nico Collins isn't that route runner. Robert Woods is too old. Mechie is a pretty good route runner, so he could establish a role. But Xavier Hutchinson is a good route runner. If you look at PFF last year, he was a 4th-rated wide receiver according to PFF, and I had a minimum of 55 attempts when I looked that up. He's also the 4th-rated. He had the 4th-rated grade for passing routes. Again, minimum of 55 targets. He's a very experienced route runner, above average, showed a consistent ability to manipulate defenders, and he's got size. Not many people on this team have size. Outside of Nico Collins, who? Robert Woods? No. I mean, he's not a small wide receiver, but he's not a huge, big body. Mechie? No. Tank Dell? Absolutely not. Right? Outside of Nico Collins, who has that size? We've got Xavier at 6'3", 205. That is a valuable asset to this team. And not only does he have the size, he has the versatility. Okay, in 2022, he played 70% out wide and then almost 30% in the slot. Put him wherever you want on, in this offense. Let him get open for you, and then maybe he gets some opportunities. My pre-draft comps, one of my ceiling comps for Xavier Hutchinson was Adam Thielen. And you think about Adam Thielen in his prime, top 10 wide receiver in fantasy in his prime, elite route runner. Well, he wasn't that coming out of college, or at least people didn't think he was. He was an undrafted free agent, right? Xavier Hutchinson getting drafted in the 6th round, similar, opportunities. They have to prove themselves through being connected to a team. My floor for him was Paris Campbell. So look, given the depth chart, I think he has an opportunity to really show out during camp and develop a nice role for himself. At minimum, I want to buy him in the 4th round and see what happens.
Yeah. I love X. Gonna give it to you, a guy that I drafted in both of my, or I think maybe both or one of my rookie drafts so far. So that's been pretty great. All right, my second deep sleeper here for us, Puka Nacua, a guy. Let's go back to the Los Angeles Rams.
Love it.
Our latest ADP, he was undrafted in the Alpha draft, which was interesting, and he was drafted in the Bravo 407 by Zach himself. So he does pick up Puka Nacua, which is great. So he's obviously going around the mid to late 4th here, depending on where you go. But there is definitely some upside here for Puka. But if you guys don't know who Puka is, I kind of give you a quick reminder: 6'2", 201 pounds, drafted with the 179th pick in the 5th round by the Los Angeles Rams. 2022 didn't have the best last season here at BYU, but made use of the opportunity. Over 600 yards, 5 touchdowns, and oddly enough, got some workload on the ground as well. A lot of jet sweeps in the backfields. Over 200 yards on the ground, 8 yards per carry, and 5 touchdowns on the ground, which was very, very interesting there when you really look at how Puka can be utilized. Led all college receivers with 3.5 yards per route one with a minimum of 55 targets, which I think is crazy when you think about it. Great yards after catch ability, very versatile wide receiver, plays outside, a decent route runner, and he plays big. Can definitely catch difficult balls, whatever the case may be, and he's also a good run blocker. Which, I was wanting to get a little research on Puka and why the Rams kind of picked him up. And I read this article, quoting Eric Yarber, who is the wide receiver coach. And basically he's saying, this is our Robert Woods, right? That's how they're viewing him because of how great of a run blocker he is and how big he is in the way they can utilize him. So I'm not saying he is a Robert Woods, but I guess that's how they're viewing him. He can be a good run blocker and a guy that can kind of separate the field for other wide receivers like a Cooper Kupp. And talking about Cooper Kupp, let's talk about the Rams offense, joining one of the best, head coaching minds here with Sean McVay, one of the best quarterbacks in Matthew Stafford, one of the best wide receivers in Cooper Kupp here, which is really going to help him excel the game, whether it's for the 1 year and however long this team is really going to be intact together, right? 2021, I mean, we all know their Super Bowl year, a top 5 passing offense, top 6 in scoring offense as well. So this team definitely has had the history, just was dealing with a lot of injuries this past year and didn't really live up to expectations since their Super Bowl year. But once again, Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, I think if those 3 pillars are there, I think we can definitely see a great competing team here, which we can hopefully see Puka Nacua on the field. And now the pathway to getting onto the field with Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, clearly going to be the 1-2 punch there without a doubt. And then Allen Robinson is no longer on this team. Injuries were definitely an issue last year, which why we saw a lot of Tutu Atwell, a lot of Ben Skoranek, right? Cooper Kupp missed 8 games, Van missed 7 games, total of 15 games there with 2 of their top wide receivers. Sean McVay, 2 of his top wide receivers not on the field. But the biggest question is, who's going to play the slot? Because Puka can play the slot or he can play the outside. So the way I'm viewing this, Cooper Kupp, the X wide receiver, Van the Y, and then the slot is essentially open for competition, I would say, with Ben Skoranek there and Puka Nacua now. And let me remind you who Ben Skoranek is. 7th round draft pick in 2021. He saw his biggest workload this past year because Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson did miss some time. And he's also struggled with injuries, right? He missed a lot of games his first 2 years based off of, with injuries, right? So, and I think the biggest thing here is, okay, how can Puka get onto the fields? And I think he can definitely beat Ben Skoranek. Once again, it may not be in the first half of the season or maybe in the middle of the season, maybe the second half of the season, we'll see a little uptick of production. We'll see him getting a bit more physical. And especially with Cooper Kupp getting older, Van Jefferson always struggled a little bit with some injuries. We can see Puka Nacua on the field, once again, even earlier than that, if there are some injury concerns with their top wide receivers, right? And or they want to play, a lot 4 wide receivers on the field. We've seen that before in the past here with Sean McVay. He will definitely get creative. So I think getting Puka in the 4th round is a no-brainer. Once again, not guys that we're looking for to get this massive workload in year 1, but guys to say, hey, I can see a pathway. Not too many guys in front of Puka. I mean, there's no one else I can really tell you that's on this team outside of Tutu Atwell that's going to be a threat, right? And we're talking about a threat with Tutu Atwell versus Puka Nacua. So I think there's a clear pathway here. It may not be the beginning of the season. Probably I would say maybe the second half, maybe week 10. We can kind of see him on the field hypothetically, and then maybe he gets 5 targets and a touchdown, and we see his athleticism with a Matthew Stafford. So try and get Puka if you can.
Yeah, I'm all aboard Puka. I drafted him with the only pick I had in our Bravo League at the 407. And we'll just say quickly, Cooper Kupp is your slot wide receiver here, right? I mean,
it goes either way. 50... I guess like when I looked at the maybe I looked at it wrong, but I thought he was on the left. But he could be the slot. Puka can be on the outside. It kind of really depends on where you want to go. Yeah,
looking at PFF, he's played 55% in the slot last year, 66 in 2021% in the slot. So I think Cooper Kupp is your slot, but I definitely think that Puka can get on the field for sure.
Yeah, whether it's in the slot
Kupp
or
is playing
on the outside.
much more in the slot than he is out wide.
Yeah, for sure.
That is it for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and let us know who your sleepers are in the comments below. Drop a like to show some love, and we'll see you guys in the next video. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.